Okay, so what does this really look like? Um, First, I'm going to talk about the back end. The back end's a little bit more cryptic because a lot of us probably don't have back ends or familiarity with Visual Studio, um, but I do. So, what we've got here, in simplistic form, is we just need to add a couple references into a program, and then you have to create what's called a hub. Okay, now, this is a language called C Sharp, but it's basically it boils down to something being called from the front end, which is going to call this send method, and then it'll pass in the name and a message, and then it will do this, which is part of this reference framework that will broadcast to all of them or add a message to all of them, depending on what things are going on. So there's just a couple methods. So that's the send method, and then there's a couple other ones we don't probably care about right now. But what I've got here is a after connected. There's an after connected method, and this kind of is how it handles the send different things to different people. So what happens here is this broadcast message goes and says that person joined. Okay, so that was the when somebody else joined. So client 3 joined, which wasn't, this is the client 2 stuff, that showed that. But the caller was that, so whenever client 2 joined, then it said welcome to that person. And then we paired up with a couple of ad messaging and broadcast messaging, just a couple of other messages. Well, that's really it from the server side, except I guess except for the references that we have to add in for a couple other things. Okay, so let's take a look at the front end. The front end, from the perspective of HTML, take a look at this. This is the PHP channel 1, and this would have been not that one. That one. So this is the same page. It's pretty straightforward. The HTML actually is very simple, in accordance with all the chat stuff we were doing, but it just accepts a bunch of stuff and puts in. But the interesting thing that we care about for this topic is what do we need to include from the perspective of SignalR? Well, we have to include a JavaScript reference. Okay, that's where we get that from a CDN out in the Ajax ASP.NET CDN, which is Microsoft. And then we also have to include a script from the server, which is what this is. This happens to be what I'm calling my server right now. This is all the code that I wrote. This code I didn't write. This code I did write. So this is getting hooked up into the hub. And then we've got some JavaScript that, again, sets up a connection to that particular code. And we've got then some connections that we have to do. And this is, I should have showed channel 1, but this is where that send message and the onConnected and all that stuff was. But this is obviously JavaScript. And then this is the idea of sending a broadcast message, which is using promises and closures to handle that type of thing. So we're getting the information from the screen, appending it to the information that happens in the discussion. This is where we're getting the name, but this is really the guts of it. So we've got an after connected, I send a bunch of stuff to the log, and then here is when the person clicks the actual send message. This line right here is actually the line that's doing the call that send that I talked about, that we saw in the C# code. And then here is the name, and here is the message that was typed in that. So you have chat, which was this variable on line 47. And then we've got the server and send, which we'll call this piece of code right here. Again, this is on the server side. And then it will broadcast. That's to do that. So you can see this isn't terribly difficult or a whole ton of code, but it's pretty slick how it works together. But you're actually calling a .NET function from JavaScript in a way through WebSockets. So that's pretty neat. All right. And then the last thing, I just wanted to show you the console app, which was this guy. Okay. And that is another Visual Studio thing. Well, I should have told you when I did that PHP, this thing. It's actually, if you didn't recognize this, in PHP Storm. But then over here I have a console app. And this console app does that's the wrong one. Hold on for a second. You just get goofy messages when you're trying to show something, right? Oops, didn't want to do that. And what we have here is a number of things that we can do. Whoops, I should switch back into this. Sorry. Switch back into this particular thing for no. That didn't work the way I wanted it to. Oh, yeah, it did. Oh, yes, it did. Okay. So how do we handle this stuff? This is just from now. This is another client. So we have to create a connection. Here we have to have a proxy, again, to that named client, channel 1 hub or chat hub, whatever we have there. Change the port color into the name, read the name. And then this is the asynchronous call from within the client here to either add a message. This is what happens when, so this is actually part of the receiving message. Because they're sending a message and there's receiving a message. So you've got some things going on there with that. And then both of them get called, this gets called when you're adding a message, and this gets called down here when you're actually sending a message. So again, this is a pointer to the send method that we talked about, right here. And then we have the name of the message. And then we continue with asynchronously trying to do that. Get into here if there's an error, otherwise it turns it yellow and does the right line back of what the information was. And then this is just when a message comes back from another user. That's what happens here. Okay. So you see that's really different code. Well, really, really different code. Night and day, actually. So between the JavaScript and the C# code. But it's pretty interesting. So that concludes that video. I'll continue our next one with talking about integration into the roll call app.